Boy, there. We see rubber pads. So we ever get brahmacharis, they will put rubber. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Jayate Bhaktivedanta
Auravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Bhagavani Prachamani Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Samsara Dava Nalalida Loka Pranaya Karunya Ganaganatam
Samsara Bhava Namalaya Loka
Apasya Kalyana Gunarnavasya Pradevura Sri Charanaravinda Mahaprabhu Kirtana Gita Adita Sarasina Kamba Sitaranga Bhaja Negura Sicharan Haravinda Sri Vigrahara Dhana Nitya Nana Singara Tan Mandira Bhajanada Still Bhaktam Dani Yungatopi Vande Guru Sri Charan Haravinda
Yukasya Bhakta Shani Yatopi Mate Guru Shri
Jatirita Sri Bhagavatra Sada Sadhana Kirtan Hari Bhakta Sanghan
Jaturveda Shri Bhagavata Sadhu Sadhana Kirtana Hari Bhakta Sangha
Kritaiva Tripti Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Sri Charan Haravinda
Vivayate Mashata Sadaiva Bhante Guru Shri Charan
Madhava Yorapara Madhurya Lila Gunayoganam Aksharvaditainan samasta shastrarutas tatha bhagyataiva sati. Prakolya priya eva tasya Vande Guru Sri Charan Haravinda.
Prabolya priya Vatasya Vande Guru Shri Charanarvinda.
Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada Yasya prasada jagati topi
Yasya Prasada Bhagavate Sada Yasya Prasada Jagati Kutopi.
Ayam suvam stasya yastasri sandhyam De Guru Sri Charan Haravinda.
Namastu Vamstasya Shasti Sangha Vande Guru Shri Charanarvinda.
Vande Guru Sri Charanarvinda. Vande Guru Sri Charanarvinda. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jai Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda
Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Time Vishnu Pada Paramahansa Parivraja Acharya Stada Satsi Sivan Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Yeah.
Nandgoti Vaishnava Vrinda.
Yeah.
Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur.
Yeah.
Prem se Guru Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Saita Dhananda Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Mila Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Swami Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories of the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanand. Namaste Narasingaya. Ada Vada Daine. Anya Kasi Purvakshara. Ganga Namaste Bharata Namaste. Yamita Taruna Singa. Singa Dayena Singa. Singa Madhicha Nam Prabhate. Avata Singa. Ita Tanyagasipu Tanvriyam Keshava Tattvanaradi Rupa Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Jaya Jagadish Hare Tavatara Kamala Singa Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Prabhupada. Oh, so what's this? Oh, Atra Pankam Talanete, or Atra Pankam Netrete. That means here's mud in your eye. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Givaradhari. Jashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana. Vachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Daudanandana Rajagana Ranjana. Vachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. So, Srimad Bhagavatam translation and purports by Srila Prabhupada. Today, I think we're doing the last verse of the first chapter of the seventh canto. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Yudhishthira has heard all this. Now he has something to say. So, Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha Vidvaisho Daite Putre Katamasin Mahatmani Bruhi me Bhagavan Jena Praladasya Chutatmata. This is very interesting. So I'll explain what it means, then we'll chant it. Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha, I'm sure you understand. Sri Yudhishthira said, Vidvesha, hatred, Daite Putra, in his own dear son. Hatred in his own dear son, beloved son. Katamasi, how did it come about? Katam, how? How Mahatmani, hatred in that great soul. Mahatma, of course, means great soul. And Mahatmani means in that great soul. How did that come? How was there hatred in that his own dear son, who was a great soul? Bruhi may tell me, explain to me. Bruhi may Bhagavan, and this is not Bhagavan. This is the evocative form in Sanskrit. Bhagavan means it's the subject of a sentence. Bhagavan, like fun, ton, Bhagavan is a direct address, O Lord. And he's using this word, of course, for Narada Muni. So just as, for example, even in English, sir is a sort of an abbreviation of Senor, Lord. And in Brazil, of course, they say, oh, Senor, the Lord, and so on. So, or if you look, in earlier European culture, my Lord, like Lord Halsbury or Lord, whatever. So same thing in Sanskrit, Lord. So my Lord, or Bruhi may tell me, Lord, Praladasya Chutatmata. Bruhi, by which, or how did it come about, this praladasya of pralad, achyutatmata. So this is achyuta, the infallible Lord, and then atmata, uh, which atma, of course, means the self, and ta means like being. So how did it come about that achyuta became his very self? Which means that in English, how would you say it in English? Like, he's my life, or he's everything to me. So he became his very soul, atmata. Ta is an abbreviation suffix which means the state of, like the state of, like being oneself. They still have it directly from Latin in Italian, ta. Like, for example, in it changed to dad in Spanish, like felicidad. But originally in Italian, still have it felicità. So felice, felice is happy, and felicità is happiness. So the same thing here. It's atmata. So there was like selfness, or being the very self of. So achyuta was his selfness, his very self. In other words, his life and soul. That's what we, in English you say life and soul. So that's the idea here. So how did such a son take birth to such a demon? Sort of little kind of irregular genetics there. Actually, one time I was at sitting in Prabhupada's class in Los Angeles, probably around 1972. Prabhupada was speaking about this story, and he said that even in our movement, sometimes you see a devotee takes birth to a demon parent. He said, I have experienced. Because Prabhupada was making, recruiting all these devotees, and some of the parents were not happy. So we'll chant this now that you know what it means. Sri Yudhishthira Vacha Vidvesho Daite Putre Katamasin Mahatmani Ruhi Me Bhagavanjena Praladasya Chitatmata Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha Vidvesho Daite Putre Katamasin Mahatmani Ruhi Me Bhagavanjena Praladasya Chitatmata. So, take it away.
Shri Yudhishthira Vacha Vidvesho Daite Putre Katamasin Mahatmani Ruhi Me Bhagavanjena Yachat Atmanta
Praladasya Chitatmata.
Yudhishthira Uvacha
Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha
Vidvesho Daite Putre
Vidvesho Daite Putre
Kathamasin Mahatmani
Katamasin Mahatmani
Bruhi Me Bhagavan Yena
Bhagavandena
Prahladasya Chutatmata
Praladasya Chitatmata.
Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha
Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha
Vidvesho Daite
Vidvesho Daite Putre Katamasin Mahatmani Ruhi Me Bhagavandena. Okay, let's try that one more time.
Yeah. Praladasya Achyut
Praladasya Chitatmata Sri Yudhishthira Uvacha Vidvesho Daite Putre
Katam Asti Mahatmani
Katamasin Mahatmani
Bhagavanyena
So, Prabhupada's translation, Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, "O my Lord Narada Muni, why was there such enmity between Hiranyakashipu and his beloved son, Prahlad Maharaj? How did Prahlad Maharaj become such a great devotee of Lord Krishna? Kindly explain this to me." So it's very short. Purport: all the devotees of Lord Krishna are called Achyutatma because they follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj. Chew, the verb chew in English, pronounced like the English word chew, CYU, means to slip or fall. And chuta literally means fallen, slipped on the great banana peel of the Mahaprabhu. So, and then achyuta means not fallen, or you think in English that like fall and fallible, so it's often translated infallible, achyutatma, or achyuta. So all the devotees of the Lord Krishna are called Achyutatma because they follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj. Achyuta refers to the infallible Lord Vishnu, whose heart is always infallible. Very interesting. It's a very brilliant observation because this whole chapter is on theodicy, the problem of evil. You know, why is there evil in the world, or why is God actually just? Because if we see, at least on the surface, innocent people suffering and bad people literally getting away with murder, then how is there justice? How is God fair? And that has been, historically the main argument against theism by atheists, and this whole chapter is on that topic. Because because Yudhisthira had witnessed something which was obviously he would never forget. It was so traumatic, and that is, as at his Rajasuya sacrifice, Shishupala sort of went crazy with envy, and he was just insulting Krishna. And so the Pandavas, of course, immediately went for their guns. They went for their swords. And then Krishna said, "No, you don't want a big melee, big riot in this sacred arena." So he just called his chakra and just gave him what they call a clean cut. So imagine, and we talked a lot about that, being there at the time and seeing that. So Yudhisthira, obviously it was anyone who was there could never forget that. In fact, 5,000 years later, it's not at all forgotten. In fact, if you read, say, like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's become like a standard reference in Vaishnava culture. There are certain pastimes of Krishna which have been used for thousands of years to illustrate philosophical points. And so this unforgettable act of decapitating Shishupala right in the middle of the sacred sacrificial arena has been remembered ever since. So, and of course, what Yudhisthira wanted to know, and as Prabhupada often said, he's asking on our behalf. It's like, imagine, let's say you're at a public program and some devotee's giving a talk, and the devotee says something, oh my God, people are going to misunderstand that. So then what you may do, during the question and answer period, you can say, you said whatever, so, people might think this or that. That's a very common thing even today. And so that's exactly what Yudhisthira is doing. You say, well, remember what happened in the Rajasuya where Krishna cut off Shishupala's head? Well, people are going to think that Krishna is partial. He favors some people against others. And since he's God and ultimately he's supposed to be the well-wisher of everyone, could you talk about that? So that's exactly what Yudhishthira did. So in some ways, times have changed. In some way, no. There are certain just basic principles of life. As human beings, we have, well, doing business as human beings, but as souls and human bodies, we have certain propensities or doubts, or things may confuse us. And so this is one of those moments where sort of material time collapses, and Yudhishthira is really speaking for us in the same way we would speak. And so on the one hand, and it's funny because you have some people who are, according to the Gita, clearly stuck in the mode of passion, who think, no, you can't really understand other cultures and, you know, all this nonsense. One of the gifts of sort of local anthropologists. So, but actually, we can understand. We can understand. And this is one of those moments, like I said, where time just sort of vanishes. And we're right there with Yudhishthira asking the same question we would ask. So that's one thing. And then another point is this story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad shows the danger of a hereditary caste system. Because Prahlad was born to not only an Asura, but the Asura. Hiranyakashipu, which I've explained, means gold cushion, which obviously the influence of Vedic culture on James Bond movies. That's where they got Goldfinger. So just special theme music, you know, when talking about this. So so Prahlad, if you have a hereditary system, then Prahlad is, you know, he's stuck in sort of the Asura community, but he's one of the greatest devotees ever. And similarly, you can have people born to devotees who are just really bad people, as history shows. And so, but it's difficult. There's this pressure, sort of socio-historical pressure, which subverts a quality-based social hierarchy. And when Krishna talks about it, he says, Chatur Varnyam Mayasrishtam, that I created, or I sort of released into the world, Srishtam, Chatur Varnyam, this system of four Varnas. Chatur Varnyam Maya, by me, Mayasrishtam. And then he says, Guna Karma Vibhagasha, according to divisions of guna and karma, qualities and work. Because if you have certain qualities, you're going to work in a certain way. You're going to act in a certain way based on the qualities you have. And so Krishna gives a merit-based or quality-based social hierarchy, which probably before too long turned into a strictly hereditary system. And now even if you look at the Mahabharata, I mean, kings tend to be sons of kings. Even the Pandavas, they were sons of a king. And Brahmins tend to be sons of Brahmanas. So what's going on there? Because on the one hand, it's supposed to be quality-based, but if you look at the history, in a very strong majority of cases, people just take up the vocation of their parents. So a few things to say about that. One is that one is genetic and the other is sociological. Genetically, if you look at the marriage system in ancient India, it's what you could call genetic engineering, not by playing with genes in a laboratory, but by arranged marriage. That's actually what arranged marriage is. It's a natural form of genetic engineering. And the point is to create sort of like a super race, a super genetic pool where you get very powerful kings or you get saintly Brahmins. And the Manu Samhita, which is sort of a corrupted work, has great things like if your wife commits adultery, throw her to wild dogs. Anyway, so I'm just mentioning that because the Manu Samhita probably says a law book, but it has some really strange things in it, which indicate, I think, it's not a pure text. It's been corrupted over time, especially because if you think about it, the strongest motive, if you're going to sort of fiddle around with the text because you're a king or you're a leading Brahmin and you want to sacralize your own agenda, you just stick it in the text, you stick it in the law book. And if you have an oral society, who's going to fact check you? And you may even think, well, this is really necessary. For example, someone may think, someone may be a heavy misogynist, which obviously could never happen in Islam. So there's a motivation. And if you are a leading Brahmin or a king, you have the power to do it. Who's going to stop you if you say, well, we found this verse? You have your in-house sages. And so it's not hard to imagine. But the original idea was, after all, what was Arjuna's main concern in the first chapter of the Gita? Varna Sankara, which means Varna mixing. That's a literal translation, Varna mixing. And Arjuna thinks this is going to be a disaster. And his arguments are not just casteism. His arguments are sociological. He's giving an academic argument. Because after all, all these different communities, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, they had their own subculture. They had their own, it's just like professors. If you look at university professors, they have their own subculture, isn't it? Their own way of talking, dressing, and so on. And so guilds, you could say, or varnas, or they were called in Europe estates. Like the first estate was a clergy. The second estate was royalty. The third estate was a merchant class or landowners. Fourth, of course, nobles were also landowners. The fourth estate was just the peasants or the Shudras. So you have this, because whenever you have a hierarchy, obviously who's ever on top has power. And so a king wants his son to be king. And so therefore there's strong family attachment. And when you have pre-industrial societies, I think a lot of people, almost, most people, almost everyone, they don't really have the ability to think their way back in time. So when you have, it's interesting because there's also economic pressure, because in an agrarian society, the bigger your family, the wealthier you are, because you have more people to work. In an urban society, which was a result of the Industrial Revolution, the bigger your family, the poorer you are. So in an agrarian society, all the economic pressure is toward a large family, and the opposite in an urban industrial society. So if you live in a village where half the people or more in the village are your relatives, and you have these large families, there's very intense sort of socio-psychological pressure that you want your kids to go into the family business. So, that's the whole thing, that's family attachment. You want your children to be as respectable as you are, or better, and so and these castes were, especially as we get into Kali Yuga. I mean, we know that it was different in ancient times, but especially as you get into Kali Yuga, um, there's all this family attachment. And so, like, let's say you're a Vaishya, you own a lot of land. Well, that land's for my kids. So, so it became very strongly hereditary by this sort of natural Kali Yuga pressure. And so that's one thing that corrupted the system. But originally, even if you say in the Mahabharata, I mean, one thing about the Mahabharata we should keep in mind, or even the Bhagavatam describes Krishna Lila, is that according to Bhagavad Gita, we are looking at a very corrupted society. After all, Krishna appeared. I mean, the central event of the Mahabharata is Krishna's descent into this world. And what does Krishna say? Sakali neha mata yoga nasta parantava. The spiritual science has been lost. What else Krishna say? The Vedas just deal with material life. Don't get into it. And what else does Krishna say? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati. I come when dharma has been corrupted. Abhyutanam adharmasya, and adharma has risen to become very strong, and the science is lost. So if you're looking to these, say, Mahabharata, and like the way everyone behaves, that's what we should do. You're really not paying attention. And then you get some of these so-called, Shrota or literatures, which may have heavy statements about women, which are actually written in the Kali Yuga. They're not eternal Shastras. They're actually written in the Kali Yuga. And that's why Vaishnavas never took them very seriously. So that's one thing. But the original system, even if you see that even in previous yugas, that the sons of kings became kings, or the sons of Brahmins became Brahmins, it was genetic engineering. It wasn't just family attachment. So that's one point. What was my second point?
Yes. You were talking about how can it be that people have married, but also sometimes like in Prahlad Maharaj was not part of the
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah, I was mentioning that, how it's
why is that?
so yeah, one thing was genetic engineering. So, but then sometimes it just doesn't work. I mean, sometimes you get a devotee born to a demon, or a demon born to a devotee. So there was another point actually I was going to make, but it just sort of slipped my mind now. Anyway, maybe it'll come back if I just keep eating prasadam. So but that's why a hereditary caste system, eventually you get very unqualified people. Another point I wanted to make is why they were really kind of strict about it, why Arjuna is so worried about Varna Sankara. That was the point. Because let's say, and this typical thing, let's say in America, let's say a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish wife, or vice versa, or a Muslim. In other words, when people just are different religions, or a Hare Krishna, member of the cult of Chaitanya, let's say marries a non-devotee. How do you raise the kids? And of course, some parents manage that well. The parents are sort of intelligent, mature, and sometimes it leads to divorce. But imagine if the religion in which you choose to raise your children is not merely like, where do you go on Sunday or Saturday, Jews, but what if it's also your vocation? What if it's also your position in society? So let's say, for example, someone like Roma Harshana, the one that Balaram red carded. So it's he had a Kshatriya father and a Brahmana mother, and he had mixed qualities. On the one hand, he was learned in the Puranas; he could recite the Puranas. On the other hand, he was very proud, and he didn't. So he was someone acting as a Brahmin, but with Kshatriya pride. And so, had he been a Kshatriya, the rule would have been very clear that if if the Lord comes, you got to show respect. But because he had a Kshatriya father, he didn't. He wasn't raised in in simply in Brahminical culture. And then, if you mix it again, like you get two parents, different varnas, and then they produce children that have different, who marry people in different varnas. Basically, the system collapses. Because after a relatively short historical period, it's impossible to say what anyone is. You sort of get a mongrel society. And therefore, the system collapses. Yes.
How can that be if you're saying that a devotee can be born from a demon father? So you're putting two people from two different varnas. Why can't that child be whatever that child is, regardless of what the two parents are?
Okay. Well, first of all, because again, for 99.9% of human history, people did not live in cities. And so for us, not a problem, just kid wants to go to law school, or the kid wants to be, whatever, wants to be a cab driver. So we live in a world where people have all the social freedom. You can go to school. It's almost it's practical for most people nowadays. It's unimaginable to think their way back into a pre-industrial society. And these enormous social pressures, which are just practically insuperable. I mean, imagine like Haridas Thakur, they tried to kill him because he became a Vaishnava. So people, I'd say most people are simply unable. They don't have the education. They don't have the open-mindedness to really think their way back into a world which is radically different in terms of, not in every way, but in terms of just relationships. And there's all kinds of things we don't do. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we don't say, because even if you believe it's true, you'll get in trouble if you say it. Or there are things that you feel I'd really like to do, but it's just the world's not going to go along with it, or there's not opportunities, there's no facility. I mean, what if, for example, back in that world, you just decide, well, I'm born in a Brahmin family, but I want to do something else. And what if suddenly you're an outcast? Or in the case of Haridas Thakur, which of course is recent, Kali Yuga, the government decides to kill you. And so it requires some intelligence to think your way back into a different world. Very, very different. You don't just go to college and, okay, I don't get along with my parents. My parents want me to be I don't know, they want me to work in the family clothing business, but I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a college professor, or whatever. And so you just say, okay, you just leave home, go somewhere, get a job, rent an apartment, enroll in the local community college. Those things were absolutely inconceivable. I mean, so many, and that's what most people do. They think our way of life is normal. Is it really? Because if we look at modern society, we say, well, people nowadays do things very differently, but there's a very high standard of morality in society, and we don't have increasing rates of child suicide, and there's not all kinds of crime, and it's not that, a huge percentage of the population is on sort of, psychopharmaceuticals. So, I mean, if you want to hold up the modern world like this is how society should be, I mean, I think people in the future are going to look back at our world and just think, oh my God, nuts. So, as we know, and now it's sort of like what do they call it? The coup de grace, golpe de gracia is, with the internet, where you have all these, a huge percentage of young people that literally their brains are melting. Test scores are going way down, depression. So if you look at all the symptoms, how people are becoming stupider, more neurotic, crazy politicians. So whatever people are doing nowadays, I wouldn't hold it up to like, well, this is the standard, by which we judge other cultures. And then maybe one last point here, and then we'll turn it over to the Mahatma Gandhi. And that is, what was I going to say that, oh my God, what was that point? Forgot it. Go ahead, Gandhi. If I remember, I'll interrupt you if I remember.
Please.
I'm just kidding.
Not really.
It was, yeah, I mean, our society is, you see, it's like Varna Sankar everywhere. So you get people who are intellectuals, but they also, they're into eating dead carcasses, or they're atheists, or everything's just chaotic. Yeah.
Can we say because of this is a different question, but because of this mixing and mixing and mixing, there is some way there that you can kind of have a choice to feed one of those different tendencies you have, like you say again on the case of there was Kshatriya and Brahmana, and we have Kshatriya, Brahmana, Shudra, and everything in such a mix and whatever, that we can actually decide I want to be this and then put the energy to that.
Yeah, but if you decide that, you may not do it very well.
I mean,
Because then you get brahmanas who have other tendencies.
but right now, what else we have? I mean,
Well, no, that is what Prabhupada said. But you see, the difference is that's what Prabhupada actually did. Prabhupada came to recreate a Brahman order, and we see that. But and it's just, if you look at what actually happened historically, of all the people to whom Prabhupada gave Brahman initiation, how many were really Brahmanas? How many spent the rest of their life acting as Brahmanas? And so, but in a sense, I think there's no other way. I think that it may take a while, but in the population, as we know, there are people who are able to act as Brahmanas. Even if they have other propensities, they have enough Brahminical, I don't know, moxie, so they can actually do it. And then if they marry wisely and they have children, so it's just, that's what it's just the long, slow process of reestablishing a sane society. But even, and you see, it's going to take a while. So, for example, you get a spiritual society, but a spiritual society by leaders, let's say, not everywhere, but in many places, really focused on fundraising rather than education. I mean, the fact that it's just because that's in a sense what kings do. They sponsor, they give money, and you build temples, even in Vrindavan. If you look at the great temples in Vrindavan, or the Keshi God, or the world's most beautiful swimming pool, Kusum Sarovara, then there were kings, or these rich Vaishyas, or monarchs that gave money. And so, but because it's interesting, because if you look at the six Goswamis, because the society there was already becoming corrupted. The Brahmins were already corrupted. And so therefore the six Goswamis, they were just models. They were so austere and they were so learned that no one can doubt that they're real Brahmins. Because they weren't, because even like Sanatana and Rupa, were Dabir Khas and I forget Sakir Malik, that they had worked for a Muslim. They've even taken Muslim names. And so therefore, because the society was so irrationally hereditary and things were so degraded even back then, so Lord Chaitanya came as a Brahmin, because that's what's needed to put a head on society. And he had disciples who were so Brahminical and so learned and so austere that no rational person could doubt that they were Brahmanas. They weren't like, well, it's a marginal case, or I don't know. They were just like super Brahmins. And the reason Lord Chaitanya did that, it was strategic and sociological. It was to establish that you cannot doubt these people are Brahmins, even though they weren't born or didn't live in the Brahmin caste. And so Prabhupada came and he said to put a head on society. And it was just sort of a mass mailer, and he initiated lots and lots of people. And out of all those people, some of them turned out to be actually Brahmanas. Or even, actually, technically, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas also get the sacred thread. They're also initiated. So, but Prabhupada, there's nothing else you could do. He just initiated a lot of people. And then, in a sense, the more people who were at some point practicing bhakti yoga, the more people would ultimately turn out to be serious devotees who would practice for the rest of their life. So in a sense, we're still engaged. We're engaged in this historical process of trying to restore a Brahminical order to act as the head of society.
So there is this research in Harvard, which I'm very interested on, and because of the fact that there's such a mix, nobody knows what the nature is, and there is such a struggle to know what I should do, and so on and so forth. So there's a very huge research in Harvard about flourishing. What makes people flourish, and it's something that really fascinates me within ISKCON, because we don't have that. We don't emphasize that so much. But I'm just trying to get our work. What is our work? Like, okay, Prabhupada want everybody Brahmana, and then you see no everybody stay Brahmana. So we should continue with that pattern, everybody should be Brahmana, or should we try to see what the tendency of the people are and try
I would say we don't want everyone to be a Brahmin. We want everyone to embrace Brahminical culture, which means that if you're a Vaishya, you don't just want to have a big house to show off to your neighbors or your friends, but you want to support the preaching of Krishna consciousness. So if you have money, you want to use it for Krishna. Whatever talents you have, that's what Brahminical culture is. Obviously, there is no society where everyone is a Brahmin. But if everyone is supporting Brahminical culture, then it works.
How do you find your tendency? What is it nowadays with this mix of chocolate and all flavors mixed? How do
What I tell people in my inimitable counseling sessions, that's a joke. It's your Varna, it's not what you would like to do. See, nowadays the whole emphasis is on, well, what would you like to do? What do you enjoy? Well, I enjoy a lot of things. I'm not sure if I should become a Sanskrit scholar or professional volleyball player or something. So it's not just what you like, it's what you have to do. You cannot not do, because that's what Krishna says, that even a learned person will act according to their nature. So if you have hobbies or things you enjoy doing, if you don't do them, you just, okay, I can't do that anymore. I don't have time. But your Varna is not what you enjoy doing. It's what you cannot avoid. No matter, even if you try to avoid it, you'll end up doing that. And because the emphasis nowadays in society is on enjoyment, we live on planet advertising. And so we're just literally immersed in this shark tank where, you know, everything around us is telling us to enjoy, and you have your rights, not your duties, your rights. And so therefore, even devotees who are still somewhat conditioned by the wacky world around us, they're actually trying to think, well, what would I enjoy doing? Wrong question. There's no right answer to the wrong question. The right question is, what is it that I cannot avoid doing? Because it's just me, and it's not what do I enjoy doing? What's my contribution? Where can I make the greatest contribution to Prabhupada's mission? But instead now, the question is, what would I enjoy doing? What would I enjoy doing? As opposed to what is just me? You know, I just have to do this, and no matter what job I think I want to get, I'm going to end up doing this anyway, or I'm going to be frustrated because I'm not doing it. And this is where I can make my contribution. So basically, we live in a world where everyone's asking the wrong questions. And therefore, you get devotees, you know, maybe in their 60s, they figure out what they really want to do.
And I think, for example, sorry, this is a special point for me because I see several devotees that I know, they may be professors, this and that, but they have a Kshatriya tendency. They have this like a defense and protection.
But the problem is that because of the way society is, if you want to be a warrior, you have to be a Shudra. You have to take orders from some, you know, corrupted politicians.
How do we do? What do we do? So
Well, but Kshatriyas, there's other things. If you look at what Krishna says about Kshatriyas, they're leaders. You could lead society. And Kshatriyas may, in unusual circumstances, they may also accumulate wealth. Because that's what a Kshatriya is, that's what they do. They don't just go and kill people. What they really do, let's say in times of peace, they create prosperity. They create the conditions for prosperity by properly managing. So, I mean, you know, there's devotees who just like to fight and they think they're Kshatriyas. You know, Kshatriya doesn't mean you like to fight or, you know, I'm into martial arts. That's not a Kshatriya. A Kshatriya, yes, also can do that, but they actually can lead and manage society. Otherwise, someone that likes to fight but can't really lead society is a Shudra. Maybe a tough Shudra. Or maybe they can be, you know, part of the infantry or something.
I have another question, but I don't want to take it.
You got a question there?
I don't know really how to phrase it, so
Okay,
I'll try.
okay, go ahead.
So Prabhupada, like what you're preaching now, Prabhupada says, don't try to see the Supreme Lord. Try to act in such a way that the Supreme Lord will see you.
Yes.
So when some of us devotees, talking about myself, come with not very good qualities, not very good background. And so you came and you tried to just be one of the wheels. And then you had leaders that would just out and out lie to you. They would tell you, yeah, go out on this marathon and we promise whoever the winner of the marathon is gets a ticket to go to Mayapur and Vrindavan. And then they renege on their promise, and then the devotee becomes brokenhearted.
Yeah, but I think we have to be adults. I mean, the point is, you know, we all have our sad stories of bad leaders. I mean, everyone has their story. I think the real, you know, the real question is, am I going to let other people determine my life, even 30 years after the fact or 40 years after the fact? I'm still, you know, letting them control me. I mean, we've all, you know, everyone is, I think it's just a question. You decide, what do I want to do for proud? You know, give yourself sort of a healing period. Like I say, if you don't have PTSD, you weren't there. And so it's just, you know, what can you do? Prabhupada, it wasn't Prabhupada's first choice to create a society with immature young people. If you look at Prabhupada in India preparing to come here, he's writing letters to world leaders. He's reaching out to leading citizens. Just, you know, it's like that Beatles song, you know, No Reply. It's just that no one, if he came to the West, you and Prabhupada came to the West. He's writing to the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, asking leading citizens to help. No one showed up. So Prabhupada ended up with a bunch of young people. I mean, when I was 20, I took sannyas when I was 23. As I always say, I'm very proud to have taken sannyas several years before having a prefrontal cortex. I think that's very prestigious. And then when I was 25, Prabhupada gave me 20 countries to lead. And I was really 25. And so we know what that means. So 25-year-old male. Anyway, so it was what's called apadharma, emergency dharma. There was just nothing else to do. And we all have our stories. But the point is, either I'm going to, for the rest of my life, let those people control me by living a life which is a reaction to them, or I'm just going to say, I'm going to, make a wonderful life for myself by doing something for Prabhupada.
So sometimes, like what you were saying yesterday, when we were having conversations, that you wanted to see devotees be enthusiastic about pushing forward ISKCON. So I find it very hard to figure out my position.
Okay, infomercial alert. We've started Krishna West. I mean, we just have to, that's what Prabhupada did. Imagine Prabhupada. Prabhupada joined the Hare Krishna movement of his time. And he gave his life. I mean, he was a grihastha. So if you read the biographies, Prabhupada was just like traveling like anything because he was trying to make a lot of money, didn't make a lot of money to help his guru because he was a grihastha. And then everything he'd given his life to literally just disintegrated in front of his eyes. I mean, we just see all the nonsense that goes on in every religious society. I don't think in the history of the world there's ever been a large-scale religious society that didn't have a lot of nonsense in it. But the point is, it's somehow still going on. Imagine the heartbreak for Prabhupada. What did he do? He just, I'm gonna rebuild it. I mean, Prabhupada, and then what's very interesting is that when he started ISKCON and when he had proven to the world, Krishna proved to the world Prabhupada's status spiritually, and Prabhupada created a Hare Krishna movement, which was hundreds of times, thousands of times bigger than what his godbrothers did, and not one of them agreed to help him. Seriously. Yeah, maybe like, okay, can you mail me a Mridanga to New York? But in terms of actually, and Prabhupada used to beg his godbrothers, why don't you join us? It was any fool could see where Lord Chaitanya had put his mercy. Even when the last time I spoke to Sridhar Swami, Prabhupada's godbrother, because there's a Vaishnava etiquette that when a senior Vaishnava is passing away, you go there, forgive any offenses, and it's classy. So when Sridhar Swami, there were several sort of like false alarms, like he may leave this world, but somehow he stayed. And then it came to the point where he's really going to leave this world now. And so because I had a very good relationship with Prabhupada's godbrothers, for a simple reason, I followed Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, don't offend them, treat them with respect, and don't associate with them. And I followed both of those. Some people offended Prabhupada's godbrothers and paid for it. Some people became intimate and they lost their understanding of who Prabhupada is, whatever they may say. But when I went there to see Sridhar Swami, I remember what he said to us. He said to us, and there was only like 3 or 4 of us, with tears in his eyes, please protect ISKCON, because all of the other Vaishnav groups depend on ISKCON. It's the trunk of the tree, which of course very few of the followers of the various Gaudiya Math gurus have actually assimilated. So, that's what we have to do. You have to keep trying. Prabhupada just kept trying. And you know, people who, how should I put it? Like the sort of academic level of ISKCON in general leaves a little to be desired. So you have some people, actually ISKCON's not so bad, but you have people who left ISKCON saying that, for example, that, well, Prabhupada, you know, left the Gaudiya Math, so we can leave ISKCON. Actually, it's not ISKCON devotees. Prabhupada didn't leave the Gaudiya Math. It didn't exist. So this idea that Prabhupada left the Gaudiya Math so I can leave ISKCON is just utter nonsense. There was no Gaudiya Math. There were like 25 Gaudiya Maths. So which one was he supposed to work with? And not only that, he tried to work with them. When Prabhupada went to New York and it was starting to really happen, he wrote to, you know, a few Gaudiya Math branches saying, why don't we make this the Gaudiya Math? Let us reconstitute, reunite the Gaudiya Math. And they refused. So anyone's trying to justify their disloyalty to Prabhupada by saying I'm following Prabhupada is obviously not a brilliant student of history. So yeah, I mean, basically everyone has their tale of woe about, you know, in ISKCON. Whether you're from North America or South America or Europe, everyone has got their story. Because that's what happens when you join a large movement run by kids. And, you know, it's not, and Prabhupada, it wasn't what he wanted. He wanted to attract intelligent, mature, leading citizens, and no one showed up. So I compare it to like in the Wild West, where, you know, where the, you know, there's been like, you know, your parents have died. So, you know, out somewhere, I don't know, in the plains of, you know, Colorado or Nebraska or something, there's like a 10-year-old boy with a shotgun who's in charge of the family. Yeah, it's not that we wanted Prabhupada to leave when we were still young, immature devotees. So it's a situation was thrust upon us. And people were obviously given positions beyond their maturity and beyond their Krishna consciousness. Some people were ambitious and wanted those positions, and they paid the price also. And other people, they were just, like, for example, when I became a guru, I can say with God as my witness, not only had I never once in my life thought of being a guru, I just wasn't into the whole Eastern culture, you know, but in fact, just the time Prabhupada left, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was become a guru. I wanted to go back to college, which Prabhupada had ordered me to do. And I actually tried. I kept appealing to the leaders in Latin America, to God brothers in North America, like, I really don't want to do this because I wanted to go back to college, which Prabhupada, you know, he ordered me to stay in college. I was actually forced by circumstances. And therefore, even if, you know, when I was a 29-year-old God on earth, you know, 8 years in the movement, obviously, would I do things the same now? No way. But I mean, some things, it's, there's just, like, there's just a lot of people in the Gaudiya Vaishnava universe that aren't really geniuses when it comes to historical analysis. Like, for example, if you say, take the gurus, sat on big seats. But, you know, I joke sometimes, you know, my godbrother Radhanaswamy was a great devotee, that I never could have written The Journey Home. Because I had like zero interest in Indian gurus. The last thing in the world, and he's a great devotee, you know, but the last thing in the world I would have done, and this is not because I'm the standard, because just we're all different. I'm speaking now not in terms of what other people should do, but just we all have our natures. I mean, hitchhiking through the Middle East, I don't think so. And and I never met a guru that impressed me until Prabhupada. So And as far as the manual, where Prabhupada explained in detail, this is how you do it. The seat should be this high. You should, accept honor this way, but not that way. How many instructions Prabhupada give? 0. None. None. And so, and Prabhupada said, don't change anything. So I thought, okay, because Prabhupada actually had 2 roles, which he often sort of merged in practice. One was he was a bona fide guru. He was our guru. Another was he was the founder acharya. And if you look at Prabhupada's writings and even his speaking about it, he doesn't always strictly separate these 2 things. So here we have a situation where Prabhupada said, don't change anything, just do what I'm doing. But if you actually follow that, then you're a bum. Then you're a terrible person because you just tried to be a guru the way Prabhupada showed us how to do it. And Prabhupada, there's no manual that said, okay, I sat on a big seat because I'm the founder of Acharya. However, if you're a regular guru, then you sit in this seat or nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And for people like me who never was impressed by any guru except Prabhupada, so it's not that, well, I'm going to do it this way because the Gaudiya Math does it that way. Why in the world would I do that? When did Prabhupada ever tell me, just do what the Gaudiya Math is doing? So, so there's sort of a need of a real history of ISKCON, not the mythical history. But anyway, here we are, we're survivors. And so I think the conclusion to wrap it up is that Prabhupada needs us to do something. So it's very simple. Either you show up for Prabhupada or you don't show up for Prabhupada. And everyone can tell their story. Everyone was mistreated. Everyone was this and everyone was that. So we have two options. We can either show up for Prabhupada when he needs us, or we can spend the rest of our life telling our sad story. And that's what it is. Yes.
Question, sorry, unrelated to this, but you mentioned in the beginning the Manu Samhita. Are there as many versions of the Mahabharata in the sense it can be interpreted many different ways?
No.
Like it's,
I mean, there's many versions, but it's all basically the Mahabharata. It's not like they're completely different. And secondly, it shows there are things like, okay, there's some sutta. Sutta means someone that recites the history. And so let's say he shows up, he lives in Southeast India, basically what is now Tamil Nadu. And let's say the king is a Shaiva. And so if you want to recite Mahabharata in his kingdom, which you do for a living, by the way, that's how you feed your family, unless you're a sannyasi. So if you want to recite Mahabharata in his kingdom, you'd better come up with a chapter glorifying Shiva. Or to give one example, which I found, in the North India was more cosmopolitan for obvious reasons, for the same reason that, Manhattan is more cosmopolitan than Alabama. Because in North India, they had contact with many different cultures. Whereas militarily and just, for many reasons, even cultures that came into North India might have some influence in South India, but as much less. And so South India is kind of like the buckle on the Veda belt. So in the North Indian Mahabharata, Vyasa, an avatara of Krishna, is born basically when a great Vedic sage rapes a teenage girl. I'm not saying that's what really happened. I actually doubt that it really happened, but that's a North Indian version. Satyavati, it's from the first volume of Great Bharata. So, and rape means like whether a man pulls a gun on a woman, pulls a knife, or pulls a shop, a curse. Shop, I say, shop till you drop. It's basically rape means, and it's, the vast majority of cases of rape are men abusing women. There's a few cases on the other side, but not so many. It means that a man uses the threat, a credible threat of violence, or it can be some other form, like, I know that you stole some money. And so if you don't agree to have sex with me, I'm going to go to the press and your career is going to be ruined. So it's basically rape means threatening significant harm. It can be physical harm, it can be social harm, it can, financial harm, but it's taking advantage of another person sexually by threatening significant harm. Not like, if you don't agree to have sex with me, then, I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to call you a bad name or something. Significant harm. And so if a sage can turn you into a frog or I don't know, a cockroach or something, that's significant harm. And so that's the North Indian version. Basically, a great holy sage rapes a teenage girl. And so when they tried to tell the story in South India, it was like, you're not telling that story down here. Maybe that's some of these weird things you do up in North India, but you're not gonna tell that story here. And so if you look at South Indian versions of the Mahabharata, Satyavati and Parashara have one of these great sort of, Hindu weddings that, take a few years to complete. And so that's what happens. They have this big wedding, and it's, the whole, what I call the cosmic village. There's like the global village. What you actually find in the Bhagavatam Mahabharata is the cosmic village. Like, the demigods and great sages and people from Naga Loka, they all know each other. They all know each other. It's just like in the world now, big politicians and billionaires, famous movie stars, they know each other. So the whole cosmic village shows up and they have a big wedding. So that's just one example. So it's still, everyone agrees that Parashara begot Vyasa in Satyavati. Everyone accepts that, but the circumstances vary.
So talking about the Manosankita and the time and then the different versions, my question was because Manosankita was mentioned yesterday when we were talking about woman Diksha Guru, because in the Manosankita supposedly says something. So
Like what? What does it say?
I don't know because they didn't give me. I'm looking for the document they mentioned.
You can find them on a site online.
Okay, but I'm just saying if there's many versions, quoting the Manosankita is not enough.
No, absolutely not.
That's what I'm saying. So they can.
Yeah, because if you follow the Manu Samhita that a woman shouldn't do this or that, then you should also, if your wife commits adultery or if you suspect her that, you should throw her to wild dogs to be, ripped into little pieces and eaten, right? Because that's Vedic, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so the point is there is no major scripture. There is no Shastra that Vaishnavas took as very important that, that says that women, for example, can't be gurus. There is no, plus it's a detail. It's not a basic principle of Vedic culture, and therefore it's an adjustable detail. And it's not prohibited in any significant scripture. In fact, as I've pointed out many times, we're supposed to be Vedic culture. So in the Veda, as in Vedic culture, there are women who are great teachers. Hershey.
Like you were mentioning about that when Krishna came to this world, it was already degraded society. But
To some extent, not like now.
like when reading your great Bharata, is it like when did it start with Asura invasion? But at the time of King Vasu?
No, even the Shastras say that in every yuga, Dharma diminishes roughly by a quarter. Oh, we have a question here. Hey, Brahmatirtha is there. Let's see. Premamrita, Hare Krishna. At the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that all the devotees of Lord Krishna are called Achyutatma, not making distinction between Kanishas, Madhyama, or Uttama adhikaris. How can we, lapidate, that's interesting, that's Portuguese. How can we actually like clear our vision, clear our eyes to seek for more qualities than defects in others? Well, Prabhupada doesn't really mean, I mean, Prabhupada sometimes would use what you call didactic hyperbole. I mean, obviously, Prabhupada didn't think that everyone in his movement was taking Krishna as their life and soul. I mean, he obviously knew that. So sometimes Prabhupada uses the word, rather than say hyperbole, sometimes Prabhupada uses the word devotee to mean real devotees. Yeah, pure devotees. Yeah, and you have to understand by context. I mean, clearly, if someone maybe, believes in Krishna, but has a very, let us say, unregulated life and many bad habits, you can hardly say that Krishna is their life and soul, but they're trying and they get some credit. So Prabhupada was keenly aware of the real world. And so when he says something like a devotee, often he means, in this context like this, pure devotee. So I remind about the example of the bee that always seeks for nectar in the flowers. Yeah, some people, and we are devotees whose nectar is, unfortunately, some addictive drug or sort of promiscuity, sexual promiscuity. And so, yeah, so if we're talking about someone that always seeks the essence, that and so on, then we have to look for people that actually have those characteristics. In fact, also in the Bhagavatam, that famous verse, Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavati Kinchana, where Prabhupada says the devotees have all good qualities and the non-devotees. So if you look at what that verse literally says, and that's the verse, it's like the wellspring from which we get all this, devotees have all good qualities, non-devotees don't have any good qualities. This is what the verse literally says. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana, one who has pure devotion for the Lord. Yasyasti means, in Sanskrit, you say of whom there is. That's how you say one who has. So yasyasti bhaktir, one who has bhakti, akinchana, pure bhakti, means they have no other desire except a desire for Krishna. High bar to jump over. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana. Kinchana literally in Sanskrit means something, and akinchana means like nothing, not anything. And so akinchana bhakti means bhakti in which there is nothing else. I mean, literally nothing bhakti, or like in the sense of, or also in the Gita, ananya bhakti. Anya means another or something else. So ananya means nothing else bhakti, ananya bhakti. It's just sort of, Vaishnav jargon. So yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana sarvair gunais tatra, in that case, with all the good qualities. The word guna can mean the material modes of nature, or as in English, it can simply mean a good quality. So if you say sarvair gunais, with all the gunas, it means with all good qualities, just like in English. So tatra samasate sura. So literally the devas approach that person with all the quality, that all good qualities are bestowed on that person. And harav abhaktasya. Hara, which is hara, which means in hurry. It's a locative. Make it better than harav abhaktasya. For one who is not a devotee of Hari. Kuto, literally where from, like how can there be? Mahadguna, the qualities of the pure devotees. Mahadguna, the qualities of the great souls of the pure devotees who were just mentioned. Because manoratena, literally by the mind vehicle, mind car, manoratena asati, in the asat, dhavato, the person is chasing all around the external energy, asati, manoratina asati, because he's running outside, literally. In other words, the real truth, the internal truth, is that everything is Krishna and Krishna's energy. And so asati means in the unreal. The person is just running around or driving around on this mind car in the asati, running around outside the truth. You actually haven't come into the truth. You're outside the truth. So what this verse actually says literally is that those who are pure devotees of Krishna have all good qualities. And how can someone who's not a devotee of Krishna have the qualities of pure devotees? It doesn't say, I mean, obviously, there are people who are not devotees are much nicer than some people who are devotees. I mean, you'd have to be just completely blind not to see that. There are fruitive workers, as we affectionately, because you can't say karma anymore, so I throw the F-bomb, fruitive worker. As we know, there are fruitive workers and mental speculators who are actually nice people. They're some of them are vegetarian, and there are devotees who are, it'd be your worst nightmare to be trapped on a desert island with them. Yes.
This is brings up an ongoing question I've had in my mind for a while. So we often this is a perfect example. The word devotee is used, but it actually means the pure devotee. There are many times we read in the Bhagavatam a word like devotion, devotee. There's some other ones too that I can't remember. But it often feels like it's talking about the pure version, almost to give us an explanation of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, here's one time I wrote to Prabhupada, and I wrote a poem. It's sort of a poem like lamenting my fallen condition. God, I used to think I was fallen then. What happened? Anyway, so I sent Prabhupada this poem, and then he wrote me back and said, your poem is very nice, but he said, your poem is very nice, but a real devotee, I forget exactly the word, it never calls himself a devotee. Never calls himself a devotee. So ultimately, in the highest sense of the word, a devotee means someone, it's a bhakta, which means literally someone devoted to Krishna. That's what the word literally means. It's the past passive participle of it's a past passive participle from the root bhaj, which means to worship, like bhajana. Or as often you hear bhaja, which means a container. So so bhakta literally means one who is devoted to Krishna and nothing else, just devoted to Krishna.
What are you saying? To use the word bhakta instead of devotee? Or I don't understand.
Well, we have a jargon. Every sort of not closed, but sort of strongly with a strong perimeter, strongly defined group, whether it's the military, whether it's any religion in the world, whether it's a stamp collector society, it's every group has jargon and the reason is very obvious, because in any group where people share a lot of common ideas, well, that's redundant, where they share a lot of ideas, that's what common means. In any group where they share a lot of ideas, you don't have to explain things. Like, I already know that. So you just use a word which refers to a bunch of ideas that everybody already understands. And that's why every community has jargon. And ISKCON has a lot of jargon. And, so when we go out to preach, we shouldn't just dump, a boatload of jargon on people. So, so we say bhakta, like bhakta Fred. And also ISKCON, I'm very proud of ISKCON because it has a word that actually doesn't exist anywhere outside of ISKCON. It's in no dictionary known to the world, and that is the word bhakti. So I think, we should just take a minute and congratulate ourselves that we are inventing new words. So we use it, I mean, that's jargon, but literally bhakta means it's devoted, someone who's devoted.
So my question, also entails, we often, the purports seem to be explaining or describing, the verses describing like the goal, the pure version, almost to give us, the idea, what's the goal? Where is it going here? What's the example? Who do we, we hear about all of these wonderful qualities that these pure devotees have as a way to show what pure looks like and as a way to show what qualities we can try and cultivate. But it seems, this is the crux, it seems like we talk about this pure thing and we're somewhere here, and it's almost like that saying, you just keep pouring milk into a pot that has poison, and eventually the poison will be removed, or you're in
Flush it out.
you flush it out. You're in the shower, you're dirty, you just stay in the shower, and eventually the dirt comes off. So it seems like this person's question spoke to this in my mind. It seems like we have this goal and we should just keep pouring something in there so that we eventually become.
Yeah, what we should pour in is devotional service.
So this is like the part B of my question. There's these 9 processes of devotional service. So can we have to chant. Different people have an affinity towards different processes.
Of course, that's why there's 9.
Okay, so does it really matter? Can we just do the things that we are most attracted to, or do we really have to have a balanced diet? Is it a progressive thing?
Well, in this age,
to understand.
in this age of Kali, Lord Chaitanya came and gave us the Harinam Sankirtan movement. So it's not just doing what I like to do, which of course we should do, but we have to see how that benefits Prabhupada's mission. Because if we are just pleasing ourselves in devotional service, that's not very advanced. I mean, because if it's really service, it means I'm trying to serve someone. And the person I'm trying to serve is Krishna, and we serve Krishna by serving Prabhupada. That's what it means to be the Acharya. That's what it means to be a spiritual leader. Because Prabhupada told us how to please Krishna. And so by pleasing Prabhupada. So of course, someone can do whatever they like, but we should try to see how we can engage our service in such a way that it actually benefits the mission. For example, the Bhagavatam says that if someone their service is just deity worship, Archayam Eva, only in deity worship, and they don't make any effort to actually help other people, to befriend other devotees, to spread the mission, then it said Savakta Prakrita Smrita. That devotee is on the material platform. So it doesn't mean all the pujaris are mundane. But the point is, let's say someone is a pujari. How does this somehow or other how does this help Prabhupada's mission? You can say, well, encourages the devotees. They see the deities beautifully dressed and so on, which is true. But are those devotees who are thus encouraged, are they going to do anything to help Prabhupada, or are they just come to get their encouragement? In other words, it's all about service. It's not the International Society for pleasing yourself in Krishna consciousness. Because if we're, gotcha. If we're acting, I mean, we have to serve according to our nature. Krishna says it's more dangerous than death not to serve according to your nature, because then your real nature will just pop out somewhere and you'll be in trouble. So, but if we have identified, I have a certain nature, this service is natural for me. How can I do that natural service in a way that benefits Prabhupada and Krishna as much as possible? Prabhupada, it's like there's too much of this. Prabhupada gave his life to save us. Thanks. And that is sort of reciprocity. Prabhupada literally sacrificed his health, just gave his life to save us. And my reciprocation is, thanks, Prabhupada. I'm going to show up on your birthday and, give you a flower. How does that sound? Rhetorical question. So maybe we'll stop here. Thank you all for listening.